that minute. All right, here we go. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Welcome to the RAINcap Bootcamp, an intensive 4-session in 2 weeks program. We are going to go over details today on how this is going to work out. We are going to learn a few things about sources of funding, and I am going to give you guys a little bit of time to finish up connecting and allowed everybody in. Great attendance. I am going to start sharing my screen now, and I am going to ask all of you to remain muted, and we're going to go over this, but I am just going to let you know, remain muted, use the chat a lot. I would actually love to see some introductions in the chat. Where are you joining us from? What is your business? And let's get this party started. All right. Give me 1 second here. All right, there we go. Okay. So this is the first session of our RAINcap program, and we are focusing on finances on this program. And today we're going to cover what funding source is right for you. A few things for you to know: we are recording these sessions. Only the main sessions are recorded. The breakout sessions are moments for privacy, for being able to interact in smaller groups, and essentially apply the content that we are going to be learning here today. Please remain muted throughout the session. If you have any questions, you can always use the chat. I do have a thing where I just copy all of the questions that you have on the chat to make sure that we address them. So do know that I am keeping an eye on that. And when we go in the Q&A session, we can be a little bit more casual and raise our hands and do all of that stuff. This is educational, so please be mindful and do not market your products or services. Be courteous, be respectful, be nice, be kind. And if you have any issues, please reach out to me. I am here either in a private message or in an email. And you also have your local points of contacts, which are the project coordinators that I'm going to introduce in a little while. Now, today's class agenda, we're going to have our welcome by Sharon Sappington. I'm going to go through the overview of the program. Then we're going to go into our speaker presentation with Robert Killen. And then we go into the breakout activity. And finally, we come in for a Q&A and a session close. So I want to welcome you, but also welcome Sharon Sappington, who is the Executive Director of Island County. She is the reason we are all here today and the reason why this program is possible. So I want to give a warm welcome to Sharon. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. Yeah, I just like to, say a few words. I'm like super excited about this. This has been a long journey to get to this point, and to have this, our kickoff of the RAINcap Bootcamp is just amazing to me. And we have so many participants. I just want to step back for a second. Why we're all able to be here is that my organization, the EDC, won a grant from the Washington Department of Commerce. We were awarded it in December, and it's a really fast-moving grant. And the grant amount is for $1.16 million, and it's from the Small Business Innovation Fund. And when this grant application opportunity came up, I right away called up RAIN and said, we got to talk. This is a great opportunity, and I think we can really partner really closely on this. So we put our heads together and started developing this grant. And it's like, no, we want EDAS, we want Skagit County with us. I mean, they're our neighbors. We want them to be all a part of that. So we wrote Skagit into this grant opportunity, and it's amazing. We got it, and we're just thrilled about it. And so, I look at this as a program with the EDC and our really great partners of the Rain Catalyst and our wonderful neighbor eDesk. And then of course, all of you. The result of this grant is a program, and the program has educational and grant opportunities. The program is really aimed at supporting small business recovery and spur entrepreneurship that will connect rural, BIPOC women and low-income entrepreneurs to the experts, tools, and capital that they need to boost their business in Island and Skagit counties. And so this is the first educational program. And what slide are we on? I'm not paying attention. Oh, you're not showing the slides. Okay. And so why don't we pull up the slide, the RAINcap Bootcamp slide number? I don't know what number that is. Okay, there it is. Great. So this is it. So the RAINcap Bootcamp, we're kicking it off. It's funded by the EDC through the grant from the Washington Department of Commerce and all the hard work of our partners, eDesk and RAIN. And I can just tell you that you are all in really great hands with RAIN. So with that, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sharon. So we are taking care of the educational aspect of this wonderful program that we hope will create a big impact in your communities. I am Anielis Raz, and I am the program director of everything that Sharon shared with us with the Small Business Innovation Fund. And only people from Island and Skagit County are able to participate. So here are our wonderful speakers. Each of them brings in a set of expertise that really digests very complex information in order to present it to you so that you can apply it for your business and maybe change your perspective and think about financial things and numbers in a different way. And today we're going to be focusing on the funding source, and then we're going to go on to how much should you raise, how do you make those strategic decisions, and then how to pitch your business story, because you always need to know how to portray that story and connect with the people that that's going to be relevant for. All right, and so I want to welcome our project coordinators. We have Brandon Erickson, who is in Camano Island. We have Bristol Carter in Whidbey Island and Jonathan Carpenter in Skagit County. Now there's a twist. Both Brandon and Jonathan are mentors of this program. And now we go to our mentors. We have four wonderful ladies, Shauna Kelsey, Hai and Wu, Monica Kutchman, and Rachel Bellinger. They are all business owners. They are bringing their experience to be able to share their knowledge with you, to apply the content, and to guide you in anything that you need. We have Shauna, Hai-An, and Rachel are in Whidbey. Monica is in Camano Island. And so, we said that you were going to be able to apply for grant funds in once you successfully complete this program when you apply. So what do you really need to be able to complete and to get a grant application? You need to attend 3 out of 4 sessions. This means either the Zoom session that we're having today, one of the some of the watch parties that our project coordinators are hosting, and thanks to the smarts of Nate Conroy, who is our supporter on everything tech, he is going to create an option for you guys to be able to watch the recording and register so that we can take your attendance credit. So thank you, Nate. You need to submit 2 takeaway forms. One is for this week and the other one is for the second week. And these are very simple takeaway forms that really are for you to apply the content that you learn. Some of them are very literal, like what funding source is right for you. So I'm pretty sure that you guys will be able to answer this. It wouldn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing to you to Robert Killen. He's the Deputy Director for RAIN, but he also has a lot of experience with small business owners. He was an artist, then he worked in finances, and he was a director of an SBDC. And what's interesting about Robert is that he has that sensibility that an artist can bring and that smarts that a person that has worked in finances has. So it's a very good combination to be able to support you in this process. And he's going to be sharing about different funding sources. And with that, Robert, take it away.
Thank you, Ani. Much appreciated. It's exciting to be here. Before I jump into the presentation, as Deputy Director of RAIN, I just want to welcome all of you. Thank you for being here. It's an honor for us to be in this role, supporting this program, supporting the Island County EDC, working with EDASC, and helping all of you. This is the work that we love to do. Our organization was founded 6-7 years ago, 8 years ago now in Oregon, and we work mostly in Oregon simply because that was how we were originally funded. But we've had the opportunity to expand, and working now here in Washington is really exciting for us. Having boots on the ground in your communities with our project coordinators is also very exciting. So looking forward to the next 2 weeks with this particular program and the next 5 months of the full scope of this grant. So welcome everyone, and thank you Sharon and Island County EDC for bringing us on board. All right, so my job today is to talk about which funding source is right for you. I do have a slide deck. Before I bring it up, I want to give you a little background. As Ani said, I was a banker. I was an SBDC director, worked for a couple chambers. I really love supporting business. And one of the things I was telling the group before we launched this session is that I found it frustrating how hard it is to find a simple explanation of different funding sources and why a business owner might choose one over the other. Unfortunately, far too often as a banker, I can attest that many business owners will go to their local bank to get funding. And if they're not right for the bank, then they'll walk away and just give up. They won't know that there might be other options, or they might hear about a huge amount of press around a venture capital fund and VC investment money, and they might approach a VC fund about supporting their business, but that fund isn't interested in what they're doing because it doesn't fit the venture capital model. And again, they just get frustrated and sort of give up. My job today is to help you understand there is a broad array of funding resources and why you might choose one over the other. So with that, let me share my screen and we'll get going. All right, just to check, Ani, am I on the right screen here? All right.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Okay, let's jump in. So we've already talked about why me. Again, what I'm trying to get across tonight is how funding works, what options are available to you, and why one might be a better fit than another. And just so you know, if you have any questions, I'm not going to be watching the chat while I'm talking, but Ani, feel free to interrupt me. I'm happy to make this an interactive conversation, but we also will have the breakout session and Q&A later as well. There is a lot of information in this presentation, so I'm warning you up front that that's going to be the case. You don't have to listen to it all. If I'm talking about venture capital and you are not interested, it doesn't apply to you, feel free to tune me out. I want you to get what's right for you out of this presentation. So let's start with what is the purpose of funding? This is one of my favorite lessons because we don't talk about this nearly enough. All funding exists to bridge some type of gap, and this can get really, into a really strong headspace here. I don't want to get too heady about it, but here are a couple examples. You might have short-term funding, like a credit card. So that funding mechanism is designed to help you pay for something that maybe you haven't received funds for yet, which happens in business. You have to make something to sell it. That's a very common business transaction, and you don't get paid until you sell it. So you have to have the money to make the thing before you sell it. In this, the example is you need to buy supplies to make a product before you sell it. How do you do that? You don't have cash in your till to do that, then you need to find another mechanism. Credit card is a very good example of a short-term funding mechanism. A medium-term funding mechanism might be a loan to buy a piece of equipment. You need a loan so that you can make more things. You don't have the money in your bank account yet. So you get the loan to buy that with the expectation that that equipment will pay itself off over time. And then the long term might be an investment or a loan for a new facility, a new piece of property. But all of these, in all of these cases, the funding exists to cover that gap that exists between now needing the thing and at some point in the future where having made that purchase, you are now able to pay back that loan. Which brings up another aspect of this that, again, we don't talk about enough, is that funding should match its purpose. So the best example of this is with equipment financing. As a banker, if somebody wanted a printing press or somebody wanted a vehicle, we would do a calculation to figure out how long do we think it's going to take for this piece of equipment to pay for itself. And then we would match the loan term to that. So if we felt it would take 5 years for this piece of equipment to actually pay itself off, that was a reasonable number, we would set up a 5-year loan. So the reason I like this is it gets us thinking about loans and lines of credit and their function and how it's actually matched to the business process. That's how a banker thinks about it. That's how an investor thinks about it. So it's good for you to understand that that's in the mind of those who are funding, that their funding actually does have a specific purpose to help you move forward. Okay. I'm going to be talking about all of these fairly quickly, but we will talk about self-funding. I won't go through this because we're going to talk about them here in a second. And then at the end, I will have specific notes about crowdfunding and a note about grants. So let's talk about the first source of funding, which is self-funding. And it might be a surprise to you, but 83% of businesses that get off the ground are effectively self-funded. They're using their own savings, their own personal credit cards, loans that they get. They might use a HELOC. It is their own credit or funding resources that they are using to launch their business. And a lot of people are surprised by that number because it seems huge, but that is the case, 83%. So self-funding is the easiest type of money, right? Because it's yours. You don't have to pay back anybody else. You can set your own terms about when you're going to pay yourself back. It is definitely the easiest money to handle, but not everybody has all the money they need to fully fund their business operation. So that's why you would need to go to others, but it always starts with self-funding. And even if you're going to go to someone else, you're going to go to a bank, you're going to try and get an SBA loan, you're going to use this grant, recognize that a banker would say, you got to have skin in the game, that having some of your own investable cash in your operation it's valuable. It shows the bank, if you're going to a bank, or shows an investor that you are committed to this. You're not relying entirely on somebody else to fund your dreams. So wherever you are, having your own funds in your business is really valuable. Okay. The next source is friends and family. I've heard this, I've seen this listed as friends, family, and fools, but I take out the fools. So friends and family. So these are funds that are contributed by personal contacts, and the value of having friends and family is that there's often minimal due diligence. If your parents are giving you money, or your favorite aunt is giving you money to start up a business, you're likely not going to be required to respond to them the same way you would a bank or an investor, right? However, it's important to note that even when you're getting money from friends and family, unless you're truly getting a gift, which may be the case, it's often that you're getting a loan, which is expected to be paid back, or you're getting an investment, which again, at some point in the future, if it is an investment, it will be paid back. So even if it's friends and family, that doesn't always mean that it is free money. It often comes with an expectation that it will be paid back. And I will tell you, one of the greatest tragedies in business is when friends and family money is used early on, and the details of repayment are not clarified at the start. And then 4, 5, 10 years later, Aunt Sally is coming because she would like her investment back. She now needs it, and she's asking to get repaid, but there were no arrangements there at the start. So if you're going to utilize friends and family money, do set up terms. And that can be awkward to set up an actual arrangement with somebody, but you need to do it. Loans are probably the one, if it's thought of as a loan, those are the ones that are often sort of missed. If it's an investment, you should actually acknowledge the investment by making your Aunt Sally either a shareholder in what is now a corporation, or maybe you now have a partnership. If they have shares, you should legally make that. You should formalize that through your business organization. So friends and family is easier money perhaps than banks, outside investors, but it doesn't come without strings. Okay. Next one is my favorite. It's bootstrapping. And bootstrapping is relying exclusively on the cash flow from your own business to fund your growth. What I love about bootstrapping is it forces a business owner to get lean, to really optimize getting paid early, creating profitability so that it can be reinvested. Bootstrapping is a great way to build a business. It's not for everything. It doesn't serve all purposes, but for some businesses that can make it happen, it's a wonderful way to start a business. Again, it's all your own funds. This is different from self-funding. Self-funding, you utilize personal credit and your own savings, personal savings. Bootstrapping is relying on the money, the profits that you're generating to reinvest and build the business over time that way. Some of the strategies here, as you can read, you have to start within your means. Don't start too big, because if you start too big, your business won't be able to sustain itself. So start within your means, run a very efficient, lean business, get your cash as quickly as possible, which means pre-selling if you can. One of the things I'll be talking a little bit about Kickstarter and other crowdfunding. I love Kickstarter because Kickstarter is essentially a bootstrapping tool, because what you're doing is getting people to pre-purchase what you're going to get them. So you get the money up front and then get them the thing. So Kickstarter is a great type of bootstrapping vehicle. Paying vendors as slowly as possible, that might seem a little dangerous. I should put a caveat. Pay vendors as slowly as possible while still maintaining a positive relationship with them. So paying them as slow as they are comfortable receiving money. You want to turn, if you're bootstrapping, you want to turn your cash cycle as quickly as possible, meaning holding off on payment and getting receipts in as quickly as possible, so that there's a very little short gap between the time you actually have to send money out and when you're receiving it. So those are the strategies for bootstrapping. I mentioned that it's not for everyone, and it's not for every type of business. The reality is that let's imagine you have a business and you're manufacturing a food product and you're serving Whidbey Island. And you have the facilities to keep that going, but you have a bigger dream. You actually want to sell your product and serve all of the Pacific Northwest. But in order to do that, not only do you need more equipment, you're going to need a different space. You're going to need to figure out some distribution that's going to cost some money. You need a lot more money than you have in the bank. And when you look at the amount of money you'll need to invest in your business in order to make that happen, you realize that you're going to have to keep working for 5 or 10 years to assemble that cash in order to make that shift. And you don't want to wait that long. Bootstrapping, if you want to grow, Bootstrapping can be difficult unless you're willing to grow at the pace that bootstrapping will allow you. Sometimes you simply need a cash infusion in order to make that shift, and bootstrapping just isn't the right way. You have to be able to leverage other people's money in order to grow your business, and ultimately that's what all funding is about. All right, the next source are loans. So loans are, I have lines of credit separate from this. So loans are a form of debt where funds are received with an obligation to repay with interest over a specified period of time. We all know what a loan is. So you get a loan for $20,000 and you're going to pay that back over 5 years at a specific interest rate. Okay, that's just how it works. The purpose of loans for businesses are to pay for things that like equipment that are going to improve your ability to produce, so they can specifically identify how your business is going to improve by bringing this new piece of equipment or whatever this loan is funding into your business. And examples of that include bank loans. We'll talk about SBA guarantees in a second. So bank loans for equipment. You can get working capital loans. They're harder to get, but this is where the bank would give you a one-time loan of a certain amount of money that will allow you to pay to increase your capacity. And those are harder to get because it's a little harder for the bank to understand exactly how that's going to change your business, but they're out there and you can ask. Those are typically shorter terms, as I state here. 12 months is a pretty common term for a working capital loan. I also mentioned down here under examples are CDFIs. Now, you have a number of CDFIs around Washington. I have yet to learn which of them are providing business loans in your area because they're all a little different. But I do know that the organization Craft3 serves both Oregon and Washington, and they are an organization that receives funds from a number of different sources. And their job is to come in and help businesses who might be struggling to get a bank loan or even an SBA guaranteed loan. The Craft3 has the ability to take greater risk than a bank can. Let's talk about that for just a second. When I was a banker, I would hear this more often than I like, that the bank is only willing to give a loan to a business when they don't need it. But that's actually true, and it makes sense, because if a business owner comes to me as a banker and they're asking for a loan because business is falling off and they're having a hard time paying their employees, as a banker, my first obligation is to ensure that the funds that the bank is giving out are going to be repaid, because the bank has a huge responsibility to protect that money. It's the goal, it's the purpose of a bank, while also supporting businesses. So if a business is in a really tough spot, it's a hard sell for a bank. There are lenders that have greater risk tolerance, and a CDFI is one of those. They're designed to have greater risk tolerance and to be able to lend where a bank might not be able to. I just mentioned there are a lot of online lenders. Some of them are just like banks. Some of them are more like CDFIs. Some of them will lend to anybody if you're willing to pay ridiculous interest rates. So you'd have to be really careful if you see really high rates and understand what you're getting into with an online lender. I also want to talk a little bit about an SBA guarantee. A lot of people think the SBA lends money, and they generally don't lend money. What they do is they provide guarantees to the banks. So the bank will take a loan, will give out a loan, and they will send the package, the application, to the SBA and say, we would like to lend this business so much money. And the SBA will look at that package and they will either approve it or not. If they approve it, what it means is that if the business isn't able to repay the debt, the SBA will guarantee up to a certain amount of that obligation. So the SBA is providing the bank, it's essentially like insurance for that loan. And that allows banks to take a little greater risk than they normally would. A lot of banks won't actually extend that risk very far, but the SBA guarantee does allow for banks to take greater risk than they normally would. So that's what an SBA loan is. It's not actually a loan to the SBA, but it's just a loan with an SBA guarantee. There are two different types. We don't need to get into it. One is more for equipment and working capital. The other one is definitely more for larger projects like buying property or buying a business. All right. Any questions yet, Ani? I will.
Not yet. Somebody asked what CFDIs were or which ones serve the area, but we got it.
You got it. Great. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't actually say that. You all know now, though. Okay. The other type of traditional lending you might get from a bank is a line of credit. Line of credit is a form of debt where funds are available to you to be utilized when you need them. The repayment model is typically that there's a minimum monthly payment. It's often an interest-only payment. You just pay how much interest is owed. But there is a maturity, and this is important to note. If you get a $50,000 line of credit from a bank or $100,000 line, it's probably going to have a 10 or 15-year maturity, which means at 10 or 15 years, you either have to renew it or you have to pay it off. And one of the things to avoid, and this is why I love that conversation early on about the use of funds and matching the use of funds to the type of funds. There's a term in the banking industry, you'd never hear it spoken outside of it, but it's called permadebt. And permadebt is when you have a business owner that has a line of credit and they've used it for different things, but they never actually paid it off. They used it to buy a piece of equipment, but as that piece of equipment was helping them improve their cash flow, they didn't use that improvement to pay down the line of credit. And so they've used their line of credit to the point that it is now maxed out. You got a $50,000 line, $100,000 line, and you've actually used $50,000 or $100,000, and it's just sitting there. And all you're doing is paying the minimum interest payment every month on whatever that amount is. Eventually, that's going to be a problem. It's going to come to maturity, and you're going to have to pay it all off. If a banker notices that that's the case, that you've used it and it's been sitting there maxed out for a period of time, a good banker will come and say, okay, it looks like you don't have any access to these funds anymore. So let's go ahead and term this out. And hopefully they'd be able to take that amount and turn it into a loan that you pay off over a period of time. But one way or the other, that money is going to have to get paid back. So it's just something to be really careful of when you get a line of credit, is that you use it in a way that allows you to pay it back as soon as the money comes in. I would say that about your personal credit cards as well, but that's up to you. All right, so examples of lines of credit would be a business credit card, an unsecured line. Unsecured means that the bank is simply trusting that you're going to pay them back. A secured line is where the bank will actually take out a lien on something. It might be a general lien on all your assets. It could be a specific lien on a piece of equipment or on your inventory with an inventory line. And what that lien allows them to do is if things get ugly and you're not paying it back, they can come and say, hey, we've got to sell off your inventory to pay down your line. Never want to get into that position, but that's what secured lines and loans mean, is that there's collateral that has been assigned. Ani?
Excuse me, Robert, somebody's asking, what do you mean pay it when it comes in?
Oh, okay. So that's a great question. I've got to be clearer with that. So let's imagine you have a bakery and you've got a special request. I'm trying to make it as specific as I can. You've got a special request for an almond flour cake, and you don't have any almond flour, right? And you're going to use your line of credit to go out and buy a few bags of almond flour, a bunch of bags. Maybe it's a big order. Great big bags of almond flour, and they cost you quite a bit of money. You go out and you buy the almond flour, you make the cakes, you send them off, they pay you if you are managing your finances well, the first thing you will do when you're paid is to pay off the amount of that line of credit that was used for almond flour. So when the money comes in that's associated with that purchase, you pay it off. Does that make sense? So yeah, the idea is to match the funding with its purpose. And then as the money is coming in from that purchase, from that use of funds, you are paying it back down. And maybe that might happen over time, which is what a loan is essentially forcing you to do. If you're using a line of credit, you actually have to understand, okay, I use this line of credit for a significant purchase. Maybe I went out and bought 10 computers for the office, and I've spent $7 grand, 10 grand on computers for the office. I need in my own head, even though I used my line of credit, I need to set a schedule where those computers are hopefully generating extra cash for me, and I'm now paying down that $10,000 over time. It's up to you to do it on a line of credit. Lines of credit are dangerous because they don't require you to pay them back. You have to do it. You have to have the discipline to do it. Okay. All right. Great question.
We have a lot of questions, so I don't know if you should keep going and then we leave them to the end, or how do you want to do this?
If there's a specific question you want answered, go ahead and ask me. If not, we can save them to the end.
So somebody asked what working capital was.
Okay. Great. Another great question. I don't need to go back. Okay. A great working capital is effectively the money that you have available to just do the things of business. It's sort of a general term for the funds that you have available to pay your employees, to pay for regular expenses. Working capital is different from money that you would use to invest in a big piece of equipment. Working capital is the money you have available to you to run your business from day to day. And the reason that can be difficult, it can be difficult to get a working capital loan or a working capital line of credit is especially a loan, is a business should be designed so that those basic operations are covered by your cash flow. So if you're coming to a bank and saying, I need a working capital loan, there's got to be a reason for that. Because what you're saying is that my business isn't actually covering my basic day-to-day costs. And if that's the case, there's a problem. So working capital should be covered by your normal operations. If you're looking to fund that, the reason you would do that is if you're going through a big expansion. So you need extra working capital because you need to bring on more people than you've had or get more equipment. There are just more expenses. And that's why growth can be a challenge, because as you're growing, you need this cash to grow before you actually get paid for the growth. So that's where working capital funding comes in. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. All right, we'll move on to investments here. So investment is a contribution of cash made to a business in exchange for a percentage of ownership. And that ownership is referred to as equity. It's the amount somebody owns of your business. That's what equity is. So examples of an investment could be investors. This could be Aunt Sally, who gives you money and she would like 10% of your business. Okay, how are you going to identify 10% of your business? In friends of family arrangements, that often happens just by saying, okay, we'll work that out later. But it should be that when somebody is actually investing in your business and you are giving them 10%, you would set up your business as either an LLC, a corporation, or a partnership, and then there would be paperwork associated with that formalizes that 10%. That way in the future, everybody knows what's what. So that's what an investment is. We often hear about angel investment and venture capital. I'm going to talk a little bit more about when those are appropriate. Angel investors and venture capital are typically looking for specifically for businesses that are on a very high growth trajectory. And so they're not appropriate for most what we call Main Street businesses. They're definitely more for businesses that want to take over the world in some fashion. All right. So some others, just general. There are lots of different ways you can find funds. Some examples, crowdfunding. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those in a minute. Leasing is effectively a way of renting. You often will see leases for equipment. So you have equipment for a period of time. It's not actually yours. It belongs to them, but you are leasing the right to use it for a period of time. Factoring is an interesting model that is really, a lot of people think of it as really expensive, but for some types of businesses, it's the only way to make it work. And factoring is effectively selling your invoices for some percentage of the total. So a factoring agent will actually buy your invoices, and then they'll go ahead and collect on those invoices. It's sort of an early form of collections. But some businesses, it is easier for them to go to somebody, to go to a factoring agency than to try and track down their invoices themselves. So it's not only about the invoices that are hard to get. That's where collections come in. But some business models really do make factoring is a legitimate way to get money earlier. And it can be very important for some businesses to get, more important to get money earlier than to get all the money. All right, so that's where factoring would come in. Vendor financing, just to note, a lot of equipment vendors will have their own financing arrangements. Some of them can be very beneficial. They'll come with support, but do know that some of them are also very expensive. So you want to take a look before you it can be very convenient to go with a vendor who's financing the purchase of their own equipment, but you will want to look at the terms and make certain that you might not be able to do better at your local bank or credit union or other form. Merchant cash advance, if you are if you utilize credit cards a lot for payment, then you can get a cash advance on that, which means that your credit card service provider will actually give you money, and then they will take a portion of funds that are coming in to repay that. It can be really convenient. You do have to have a history. You can't just start and say, hey, give me money in advance. You have to have a history of that. And then grants, I'll talk a little bit more about grants in just a second. Okay. All right. So a little extra about crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is newish. It's hard to say it's new. It's been around, I think, now for almost 15 years. But there are different types of crowdfunding. We often don't think about that. Thinking broadly, what crowdfunding is going out and raising interest in your business idea so that a crowd will pay small amounts of money to see you succeed. I mean, ultimately, that's what crowdfunding is all about. But there are different flavors. I've listed 4 of them here. I think these are the primary 4. There are rewards-based crowdfunding like Kickstarter, which is also that pre-sale model where people will pay you in advance, then you make the thing, and then you give them the thing. And the rewards is not only do you give them the thing, but because they have come in early or they've come in with a lot of money, you also give them some extras along with it. So that's rewards-based crowdfunding. It is effectively pre-purchasing what you're going to be producing. Donation-based crowdfunding, we don't see this quite as much in for-profit businesses as we do nonprofits, but there have been some small businesses that have started up with a GoFundMe because they've got a really cool idea and they feel like they can make that work. And it is purely donation. And that's why it can be harder to find in for-profit businesses is you're asking people to fund you just because they like you or they like the idea. And that's a little bit harder, but it is out there and I have seen it work. There's debt-based crowdfunding, and these are a little harder to find, but Honeycomb Credit is one of those. And these are crowdfund. It's all the same model where you create a pitch, you create a video, you send it out into the world, and then those who like what you're doing will give you money, and that'll all be converted into a loan that you will pay back over time. And an organization like Honeycomb will actually distribute the payments to everybody, so you don't have to send checks to everyone individually. So that's a benefit. And then the last one is equity. And equity-based crowdfunding is same as debt, except what comes out of after people have contributed to your campaign is that their contributions get packaged up as a piece of your business, that they now have a piece of your business. These are usually designed to be paid back at some certain point in the future. It might be 3 to 5 years based on how you're growing. It's more akin to what we would see in venture capital and angel capital. So equity-based crowdfunding is really kind of like venture capital, is really for those businesses that are going to hit it out of the park, that are going to grow very fast and bring in a lot. So those are the 4 different crowdfunding models. And the last thing I want to talk about is grants. And many of you are here, maybe the vast majority of you are here with the expectation that you will fill out an application and apply for the grant funds that are coming through the Washington State Department of Commerce, which is wonderful. I love grants. It's always great to get money that has effectively very few strings and that you don't have to pay back, right? That is great money. There are some examples of grants that are always around or almost always around. There's export assistance grants. I know the Department of Commerce has an export voucher program, which I think is up to $10,000 in support to help you if you want to export. Right now, there's the disaster recovery. It's actually an employee retention credit that is out there. We're hearing a lot of there's a lot of advertisements on the radio about the getting this retention credit, and that is still available. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, there was the EIDL loan program, which was effectively a grant, and the PPP, which acted as a grant as well. Those are very rare, but we all experience them. And then my favorite and least favorite grants are the SBIR and SITR. And they're my favorite because they've always been around. They're significant amounts of money, but they are for a very specific purpose. The SBIR and SITRs, they're SBA grant programs, and they get pointed at, if you follow any clickbait article about getting grant money for your business, it's eventually, if you follow the stream, it's going to land on those programs. But those programs are exclusively for monetizing or commercializing research, typically in universities. So they don't apply to 99% of businesses. So that's why I don't like them, is because they've created this conversation that gets everybody thinking that there are always grants out there available and all they have to do is look harder. That's just not the case. I wish I could say that there were always grants out there for anybody who wanted to look and look hard enough, but they can be really hard to find. And while I love grants for providing funds that don't need to be paid back, there's also a danger there. And the danger is thinking that there are going to be grants that'll get you out of a jam, that grants are going to be available. There's going to be this free money available. I just need to look hard enough. When as a business coach, it's my job to help a business create a model that will grow under its own steam, and it won't require a grant to actually make happen. So I love grants when they're available, and we're thrilled to be a part of this. I just want to be certain that everybody knows that these grant funds are a rare thing, so not something to count on. You can't count on this happening again next year or the year after that. The COVID era, I'm afraid it has maybe conditioned us to thinking that these funds are going to be available forever. There will come a time when they disappear, And we just have to build businesses that function on their own. All right. So what are the factors that determine the best funding sources? So there's financial condition, the stage of your business, purpose of funds, and growth rate and or innovation. So I'm going to go very quickly through these. Financial condition is pretty straightforward. A bank will use the 5 C's of credit. They're going to look at, what is your cash flow? How much money do you have available? Do you have assets that could be paid off to pay this back? Your credit under character, they're going to be looking at your credit and your experience and the conditions of your industry. Those are the types of things that a bank will look at. And actually, all funders will look at this in one way or another. Banks call it the 5 C's of credit. The others don't typically use those terms. The stage of your business, is it brand new? It's in the idea stage, or have you grown? Are you already at a point of maturity? Are you trying to renew or rebuild your business? At the earlier stages, as you're just getting off the ground, the best funding options are going to be yourself, right? That is obviously the best source because it's the easiest to get as long as you've got the money or the credit. Friends and family, going to a CDFI or an organization like Craft3, if you're the right type of business, an angel investment, and crowdfunding can be a great source at the very beginning. It's harder to have a bank get behind you because you've got risk associated with a brand new business. Another factor is purpose of funds. We already talked about funds being used to cover a gap. So, and I won't go through all of these because we've really talked about most of them already. I will mention down at the bottom there, covering losses due to rapid growth. I think I shared, if a business is growing very quickly, it's often actually showing losses and it could be for years. It's why you hear about these multi-million-dollar companies that are getting these huge investments and they haven't yet shown a profit. The reason is they're growing so fast that they're having to pay for that expansion before the sales actually come in. So yes, they're not showing a profit because they're growing so fast. And that's the world of angel and venture capital. And then this last one is, these are tied together. The growth rate I just talked about. Innovation, if you have something that is truly innovative that the world's never seen before, it's going to be harder to get a traditional funder like a bank to understand or support you because they just don't have anything to compare it to. So the more innovative something is, the faster the growth rate is, the more likely you're going to lean into outside investors who are willing to take that risk with you. And if they're going to take that risk with you, they're going to ask for a bigger piece of the pie, which is why an investor will take a piece of the business as opposed to a bank that's just looking for interest on the amount. All right. All right. I just wanted to share this. This is one way that I think about different businesses and the types of needs that they have. So at the bottom left here, we see our local businesses with relatively modest innovation. So this will be a local grocery or a restaurant, local service providers. As you go up, you see greater innovation where you might have artisans and makers doing other things. And if you go over to the right, you're thinking bigger and bigger. Down in the lower, the lower left quadrant is where you would find banks are really comfortable. The upper right quadrant is where you will find investors, and everywhere else, you're just going to have to work it out. That's just kind of how businesses are structured and how lenders see them. So we're going to move into a breakout activity. That's the end of my presentation here. And Ani, did you send them the link to this document? Okay.
Yes.
So you all have
received. I'm going to put it on the chat as well. Perfect.
Thank you. So you will all received this, and I realize there's a lot of cells in this spreadsheet. Don't let that scare you. Really want you to focus on the first 3 big columns there, which are stage, growth rate, and financial condition. The idea is to take a look, to think about where your business is in terms of stage, from idea stage all the way through, you know, your growth, and you might have a very mature business. You might even be thinking about your next iteration, which is what renewal is. That would be the 5th column there under stage. Think about where you are, and then look at the pluses. The pluses are the sources of funds that would be the best fit for that stage. Then look at growth rate. What is your expected growth rate? Are you level? You're comfortable where you are? You have no growth intentions, or maybe you want to grow spectacularly. Again, look for the options there. And the last one is financial condition. The idea is just to take a look at the right column for you and look at the different types of funding that would be best for you. And this is just to start having you think about this, and how, you know, you might be surprised that some of these resources are available or aren't. The other 2 columns, I don't talk about it a lot, but some people are very sensitive to how much funding costs them. So I've listed, and these are very general, but I've listed how the cost of different sources of funds might be. And then the purpose of funds over here at the end is just to give you a sense of what these different sources are typically used for. Again, this is just to help you start thinking about the different ways that you could fund your business, and just have that conversation. So
Robert,
yeah, go ahead.
When you talk about the financial condition being low or high, can you elaborate a little bit more on what that means?
Sure. So I think the easiest way, I'm going to go back up, if that's okay. I'm going to go back up here to the 5 C's of credit. So when a bank looks, whoops, I missed it. When a bank looks at the 5 C's, when the bank looks at the 5 C's, all of these relate to financial condition. So if you are a sole proprietor and you're primarily self-funding, then your financial condition, and I hate to say this, but the bank's going to look primarily at your credit score. That is going to determine what your financial condition is. If your business is larger, it's been around for a little bit longer, there may be other aspects of your financial condition. A big piece is collateral. So if a bank is going to have the SBA sign off on a loan, so you're going to get an SBA loan, the SBA is going to ask if you have a house, right? And if you do, they're going to put a lien on the house associated with that loan. It's just the way it works. So having a house, having a piece of collateral that can help repay the debt if things go south, is part of the financial condition equation. If you have decent credit, you have collateral that you can assign, that can be assigned, whether it's business collateral or personal collateral that you can bring. You might have decent savings and even retirement accounts. They might not assign the retirement accounts, but just having those tells the funder that if things get tight, you have resources that you can use to help make this all work out. All of that relates to your financial condition. It's very broad. But yeah, so unfortunately, there's not one score for all of this. That's actually the job of an underwriter, is to determine what your financial condition is, but all of these play into it.
All right, wonderful. So let's do the breakout sessions. You will all be assigned to them. If you stay and hang out over here, don't worry, you won't be alone. I'm going to be here, and we're still going to be able to go through the activity. So I shared the file on the chat. So if you guys need to open that up, you're welcome to. All right, I'll see you in a bit. Okay. All right. So let's see. I'm going to assign some of you to a few rooms. Actually, can you guys see? Yes. Okay, I can see it now. All right. So, Robert, would you like to open up your metrics while I send people to different rooms?
That would be great.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me change my screen here so that I can see more of you. All right, so I guess those who have stayed here, we can work with. So if you haven't yet.
And the reason why everybody is in this main room is because we needed to come back for the Q&A session. So let's get to the questions that you guys have been asking throughout the presentation. You can continue to write them on the chat and I will continue to copy them. And if we have some more time and we have some silent moments, then you guys can unmute and we'll go from there. But we'll worry about that when we get there. So the first question I got here for you is, do the Skagit and Allen Counties SBA support networks offer this guarantee? I think it's talking about guaranteed loans.
Okay. So the SBA is different from the SBDC. There might be a confusion there. The SBDC is a network of advisors that is actually funded by the SBA. But the SBA is a federal organization, and they do have regional offices, but those offices really don't have function. The SBA, it's a federal organization that works with banks and in some cases credit unions to guarantee loans. So not every bank is attached to the SBA. So if you're interested in that, you'd want to reach out and ask the banks that you work with, do you provide SBA backed loans, or just say SBA loans? And they will say yes or no. And if they say yes, then they have that capability. I will say that some banks are better at SBA than others, so it might be worthwhile having some conversations about that. My screen just got weird. Okay, there we are.
Oh, I think it was stop the screen sharing so we can actually see you.
Got it.
So Martin, in regards to the grant funding that's available for this program, this is information that is going to be released once we have everything set up. Like Sharon mentioned at the beginning, this is a very fast-paced program, and we are essentially developing and deploying all of the resources as we go. So now let's go to another question. Does the ABA actually pay part of the loan back if the business cannot? And then does the business owner owes that money to the SBA?
So yes, the SBA does pay back the bank. And if things go south, and the SBA typically doesn't just release that obligation. If a deal goes south, the SBA can come back to you asking for repayment. And I've never actually witnessed the SBA foreclosing on a home. They wouldn't foreclose on a home, but they could have a lien on a home, which means that when the home eventually sells, the SBA gets paid off first. Actually, like I said, I haven't seen that happen, but the fact that it exists in the documentation tells me that it has. You can also run into challenges if you wanted to get a second SBA loan or any type of funding from the Fed. If you have defaulted on an SBA loan, then that default, if it hasn't been paid off, will sit in the federal database, and it can make it harder to get future funding that has a federal connection. So yeah, so all the things, yes, you probably do owe the Fed.
Yeah, every loan has to be repaid. In the very, very rare case that you find a forgivable loan, then that is when you wouldn't, but you always have to pay a loan back. Yeah. And you guarantee that loan in one way or another. All right, so let's go to the next question. Should I negotiate amounts and percentages when getting a loan?
So chances are you're not going to have a lot of opportunity there to negotiate. You can if it's a friends and family loan, but any institutional loan, they will have they'll have their matrix in front of them, and based on the credit risk factors and the type of industry you're in and how long you've been in business, all of those things, they will identify a rate. One area where you can push back is in credit cards. You can push back on credit cards and say, hey, I'd like a lower rate, and see what they say. But no, Robert Killen is not related to Don Johnson, but I'd love to be, speaking friends and family. So you don't have a lot of opportunity in most cases to negotiate rates on loans. When it comes to the investment side, everything is negotiable. So if somebody says, I'm interested in providing you, $250,000 to build out your business, and I want 20% of your business to do that, you can absolutely come back and say, I'd love your $250,000, but I'm only willing to give you 5%. And then the negotiation starts. That's very common in that world, but not so much on the loan side.
All right, wonderful. For loans and grants, how much oversight by the lenders or the giver is there? For example, if you provide invoices for the spending that they approve, do they specify the vendors that you can use, etc.?
Mm-hmm. So you're probably asking related to this specific grant program. And as Ani said, a lot of the details are still being worked out. There's not going to be a lot of oversight, but in the application for this grant, you will be expected to tell on the application what you plan to use the funds for. And in terms of receipts, we're still working out whether receipts will need to be actually shared, or if you'll simply need to warrant that you will make them available if they are asked for. So the idea is, if you're going to get the grant, that you will use the money for the purpose you intended. And the way this is moving so quickly that you will likely get funds before you would have a chance to get receipts. So this is a bit of honor system, but with a certain amount of accountability built in. But again, the details are still being worked out.
And we will share that with you as soon as we have that ready. Do know that only the people that complete the 3 things I mentioned to graduate, which is attend 3 out of 4 sessions, or go to the watch parties, or go to the watch the recording, and submit the 2 forms that are on the slides that you already have on your email, are the ones that are going to be extended an application for the grant.
And I just saw, I think it was Kara, she was actually asking about in general. So it depends on the type of funding. If a bank is giving you a loan to buy a specific piece of equipment, they will have underwritten that loan based on that assumption. So in that case, you would absolutely have to use the loans for that purpose. If you are getting a line of credit, there's typically no requirement to provide receipts or anything with a line of credit, although there are some lines of credit that are specifically built that way. There are construction lines of credit which are tied to specific purchases. There are inventory lines which are tied to specific purposes. So loans, yes. Lines of credit, no, typically. Hopefully that answers your question. With grants, it's different with every grant. Some grants, like the EIDL, and the EIDL grant was very open-ended. You're supposed to use it within sort of a broad collection of uses, but there was very little oversight. Some grants are very tightly overseen.
All right, thank you, Robert. Can you use the equity of your home to secure a loan? Absolutely.
In fact, that's one of the most common ways to self-fund. You can use your equity in your home. You can get a personal home equity line of credit, HELOC, to fund your business start or fund some aspect of your business. You can also kind of hold off on that. And then if you're asking for a business loan, you can offer to the bank your property as collateral, so that equity would help the bank make a decision in your favor. In both those cases, you're using the equity of your home as a tool for your business. It is a very common use of equity.
What is considered good or great predictable cash flow? Are we talking about grossing 50K, 100K, 200K?
Great question. It's not actually the amount, it's the consistency. So what a bank wants to see is that you're consistently showing positive cash flow, you're showing profitability over time. So a lot of banks will ask for 2, maybe even 3 years of financial statements so that they can see how consistent you've been. And if you're showing consistent cash flow, they know exactly what they can offer in terms of a line of credit or a loan, because they know how much money you're getting that can be put back toward that. So the predictability is really that's what they're looking for, is predictability. Now, if you need a large amount, they're going to want to either see that you have a large amount of cash coming out, but that's a very flexible term, and they're going to want absolute proof that by purchasing whatever it is you're going to purchase with the loan, it's going to increase your cash flow by a certain amount, and that's harder to prove. But they're going to be looking for that. The underwriter actually has to say, I am confident that this loan of $200,000 is going to increase business cash flow enough to cover this expense over a period of time. They have to be able to say that.
Excellent. If offering equity of your business, how should you assess a reasonable percentage, and what are the pros and cons of that?
So this is the area that I'm probably least comfortable in. I definitely came from the banking debt side of this equation. So when you're talking about determining appropriate amounts to give away of your business, there are people on our team who are much better at that. Our CEO, Caroline, being one of them. But I will say, if you just watch Shark Tank like everyone else, it can vary dramatically. You might have somebody come in. We actually have a client here in Oregon that if somebody were to come and say, you've got a fantastic idea and no ability to actually turn this idea into a business, we would like to give you $5 million, and we're going to take 90% of your business. That would be a good deal for him, because he's not going to move forward alone. He's not going to make it happen alone. And if somebody came in with the capability to turn his idea into $100 million business, that would be very good for him. On the other hand, you might have somebody who's bringing in an amount of money and they ask for 50%, when really, when you look at that contribution and what that would pay them out in the future, it's way too much. So, 10% or 20% would be more appropriate. It has everything to do with what they're contributing. And it's not only the cash, but when you bring on investors, especially in the venture capital world, you are often also bringing on expertise that they're pulling in so that they can help you build your business. It's not just giving you the money so that you do it. They provide additional expertise. So that calculation is hugely varied from, I'd say, from 90 to 10. It's an enormous range. That's the best answer I can give you. And actually, Nate Conroy probably knows a little bit more about that world than I do. Is that a decent answer, Nate?
I thought that was an excellent answer. Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right, so let's see. If you have previous bank loans, how does that affect your ability to get other bank loans?
So in terms of financial condition, one of the things that a bank will look at is your existing liabilities. How much debt do you already have? If you have a significant amount of debt, that's going to impact your ability to service all that debt. So if you've got a lot of debt, do you have the cash flow coming in to pay all of those payments and pay those debts off over time? The more debt you have, the harder that is. But depending on your business, some businesses have a lot of debt, but their cash flow is so good because of the type of business that they're in, or how they've built their business, that they're able to cover it. And sometimes, even if the business isn't able to, the bank would never approve this, but sometimes a CDFI or a municipal lender, some cities have their own loan departments, if they can bring in what's called global cash flow, which includes not only the business, but also your personal cash flow. Some business owners have other sources of funding that they can bring in that will help cover greater amounts of debt. But more debt makes it harder. We'll just put it that way. But there can be ways to overcome it if you have good cash flow.
All right, wonderful. Well, we are essentially reaching the end of our session today. I know you guys have a lot of questions about the grant that is related to this program. And once again, I'm just going to tell you, please hold on tight. We are going to share that information with you, who is eligible to apply. The first thing that you need to know to be eligible is that you need to fulfill this educational requirement. And then all the details as far as where can you spend that money, who is going to be eligible, the size of your business matter, all of those things are going to be answered when we develop all of the guidelines. This is going to be at tops 2 weeks. If we have it sooner, we will share that with you sooner. I know that it is not the usual way that things work for you, but this is just the timeline that we got, and we are just handling and making it happen. So please be patient with us, and we will share. You will be the first to know when we actually finalize all of those details. So thank you so much for your patience beforehand, and thank you for connecting today. I hope that you all have a good evening, and I will see you, or we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Ani. And if you want to get me the chat, I will go through the chat and try and answer all the questions, and we can send that out in an email.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the questions.
Everyone.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful
Good one.
evening. Thank you so much.
All right.
Hey, Annie, do we need to, are the questions that you wanted the feedback from this session under the in-class description in the attachment from yesterday, or is that a separate form?
It is going to be that form. I just combined the sessions per week so that you guys will just do it once instead of having to ask you to fulfill it 4 times.
So there's one feedback form for week 1, and that will have questions related to tonight and tomorrow night.
Okay, so we don't have that form yet.
You do have the form. I sent it yesterday. Oh, did I send it yet?
No,
I
so
did
there's
not
the how
send
much
that
did you
yesterday.
rate? You sent the breakout activity and
I
then the
did.
matrix.
That is
So-
correct. It
Okay,
is
just
on the
wanted to
slide
like
deck.
double check. I no rush on it, but I wanted to double check that I wasn't missing something.
Yes, no, thank you. Actually, I will send that after. So I will send that email on Friday
Perfect.
and provide you that with that. I just didn't want to bombard you with so many things because
No,
I was
that's
already feeling
great.
like I was, because I shared things for the 2 sessions. So I was like, I'm just gonna do it slowly.
No, that's great. I just like went through all the slides and I read the other one. I'm like, okay, I just want to double check. So thank you so much for your time.
Olivia, Charlotte
Yeah.
actually pointed out that the mention on the slide early in the slide deck actually
has
does
it linked?
It does link to those.
Oh, cool. Okay, I
Yeah.
went through the slides, but I didn't click on that. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte.
All right.
Have a good evening.
I think that's it, everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation, Robert. Always good.
Pleasure.
It's
My
great,
pleasure.
Robert. Thanks.